How Syracuse can hold serve at home and beat the UConn Huskies.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're watching Locked On Syracuse right now on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite audio platform. On today's show, how Syracuse football can beat the UConn Huskies, a much improved football program, but still a program that Syracuse should be able to beat on Saturday. The odds makers over on FanDuel currently have Syracuse as 6.5-point favorites. Now, in order for Syracuse to win this game outright against UConn, which is really all that matters, forget the spread for just a moment, they cannot give UConn any gifts in this game. Make UConn beat Syracuse. Don't let Syracuse beat itself in this one. Also, speaking of guys who can beat Syracuse, how about their explosive wide receiver in Skyler Bell? Syracuse football newsflash, you might want to double him throughout the game. But we're going to start the podcast talking about challenging UConn up front. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, last week, we knew was going to be a challenge for Syracuse football as far as their offensive line and their defensive line against a tough and experienced Tennessee front. This week, still a challenge against UConn. You have to respect them, but they are not the Tennessee Volunteers. I want to see Syracuse in this game win the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And let's start with the offense here. Now, Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse, he recently mentioned how they want to give true sophomore running back Yasin Willis the ball even more than he had last week. Last week against Tennessee, he had 23 carries for 90 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's also important to mention that wide receiver Jonte Cook, who had a pretty nice debut for Syracuse football, the transfer from Texas and Washington, good debut for him. Unfortunately, according to him, he's dealing with some sort of lower body injury right now. Should mention that he also said it's a minor injury and that it should not necessarily impact his availability on Saturday against UConn. But it's worth mentioning that Jonte Cook, who is arguably Syracuse's top wide receiver, probably is their top wide receiver if we're being honest, is a little dinged up right now. So that's even more reason for Syracuse football to want to give the ball to Yasin Willis. Now, how does this relate to challenging UConn up front with Yasin Willis? Well, let's talk about UConn's defensive line. If you go look at their 2-deep depth chart that they released for this upcoming game against Syracuse on Saturday, there's only one player along their front that is listed at 300 pounds or more, and that is backup nose tackle Marquise Black. Now, Jeff Nixon, offensive coordinator of Syracuse, tends to be very creative with his play calling, and I really don't have any problems with Jeff Nixon as the offensive coordinator. He has done a fantastic job, really, since day one with Syracuse football. He knows how to call a game. So I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, Jeff Nixon, throw the creativity out the window here. No creative plays whatsoever. But when in doubt against this UConn front, challenge them. You have Yasin Willis, who is a big, tough, physical running back. He could handle Tennessee. He was running Tennessee guys over. That should say something to you. Give this man the ball. When in doubt, run up the gut against the UConn Huskies. And also, feel free to use some tempo as well. Move faster on offense. Make this UConn front even more tired. So that's offense as far as challenging them up front with running back Yasin Willis. As far as the defense, this is not going to be easy. Their two running backs in Cam Edwards and Mel Brown, they are both very capable running backs, and UConn will use more than just two ball carriers throughout the game. So kind of similar to the Tennessee matchup, where Tennessee has multiple running backs that they like to shuffle through, whether it's Peyton Lewis or Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop, right? UConn, maybe to a lesser extent, does the same thing as a team like Tennessee with multiple running backs on the field. That means if you're Syracuse, you are going to be constantly going up against someone in the backfield who is fresh throughout the game. Now, having said all of that, can this Syracuse football front, can they stop the run? Can they generate a pass rush against UConn without having to necessarily load the box? Because that would help them tremendously in this game if they do not have to put 7-8 guys in the box to stop the run, and they do not have to put 7-8 guys in the box or blitz in order to generate some sort of pass rush against Joe Fignana. Because we'll talk about it in the next segment, they also really need to keep their eye on wide receiver Skyler Bell. So you're going to need help in the secondary in this one against UConn. So this front in particular has got to be able to stop the run and also generate some sort of pass rush without having to put 7-8 guys in the box. And let's be clear about UConn. Yes, they should absolutely be respected. This is also not the Great Wall of Dallas offensive line here. 3 of their 5 offensive linemen are 300 pounds or more, but that means also 2 of their guys are less than 300 pounds along that offensive line. For context, everyone on Syracuse's offensive line is above 300 pounds. And by the way, with UConn, yes, 3 of their 5 are 300 pounds or more. 2 of those guys are only 300 pounds, which I know sounds funny, only 300 pounds, but we're talking about Division I college football terms here. 300 pounds on the offensive line isn't exactly the greatest amount of size in the world in Division I football. So if you're Syracuse, can you take advantage of perhaps an undersized offensive line and defensive line for UConn? Fran Brown, head coach, he talks about physicality, how Syracuse needs to be more physical. They definitely have to out-physical UConn in this one. What are your keys for Syracuse football to beat the UConn Huskies on Saturday? Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Now, coming up, we'll talk about UConn's most explosive weapon on the outside, Skyler Bell, and why Syracuse needs to double cover him. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. You can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel, the smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. What do you think is going to happen on Saturday? Who do you got, Syracuse or UConn? Comment your thoughts as well as your score prediction in the comment section below. Now, how does Syracuse beat UConn? We talked about earlier that they have to challenge UConn up front on offense and on defense, out physical the UConn Huskies. Now, we're going to talk about this secondary of Syracuse football, because there's one guy who we talked about yesterday on the show that they really have to keep their eye on, and that is wide receiver Skyler Bell. Let's face it, this is probably a player that Syracuse football throughout the game is going to have to double cover. Now, it should be simple enough to do that if Syracuse doesn't have to load the box as much. If they don't have to load the box, well, now you have more players in the secondary. You can help on Skyler Bell. This is why it's so important that Syracuse can challenge UConn up front. But in case you need a refresher on Skyler Bell, since we talked about him on yesterday's show, that's okay if you missed it. Last year, 50 catches for 860 yards and 5 touchdowns. That includes a 10-catch, 113-yard performance against Syracuse. And last week in the season opener for UConn, he had 4 catches for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that included an 80-yard catch and run score. If you're Syracuse, the mindset against Skyler Bell has got to be this. Anyone but him has to beat Syracuse. Anyone but him. This is someone who one day could be in the National Football League. Do not be surprised if Skyler Bell is at an NFL training camp 11 months from now, August of 2026. If Chris Parker or Jackson Harper or Juice Farine, etc., all of UConn's weapons, if they go out and they showcase their talent and they perform and they beat Syracuse, so be it. At that point, you tip your cap and you say, you know what, UConn? You're just better than Syracuse. Okay? But do not let Skyler Bell beat you. That has got to be the mindset. Also, UConn, they like to use Skyler Bell in multiple ways. They'll put him in the slot. They'll put him on the outside. He's also very good after the catch, as demonstrated last week with that 80-yard catch and run. He caught it near the line of scrimmage, and then he just went right down the field against Central Connecticut. It reminds me of a certain matchup that Syracuse had last year, which will bring back painful memories for some, especially if you are a Syracuse fan that's watching or listening to this. So I apologize, but there's a reason why I'm bringing it up, okay? Syracuse, when they played Stanford a year ago, and they had a wide receiver who's now in the National Football League by the name of Alec Iomanner. And I remember going into that game, and we all knew it, that is the one guy on the outside for them that can really beat Syracuse. Everyone else, yeah, they're Division I football players, sure, but Syracuse is better everywhere else except for maybe Alec Iomanner. That's the one guy that Syracuse has to concentrate its focus on. They need to double cover him throughout the game. Well, that's not necessarily what happened. He caught a touchdown early in that one. It was a spectacular one-hand grab, but guess what? He was single covered on it, and he can make big-time plays. That's why he's in the National Football League. And then, of course, the mind-boggling play, 4th and 9 late in the game. Syracuse rushes 3, they drop 8, and yet Alec Iomanner is still left one-on-one on the outside. The bottom line is this with a guy like Skyler Bell. He is their main weapon on the outside for the UConn Huskies. When Joe Fignano drops back to pass, his first read more often than not is going to be Skyler Bell. And at minimum throughout the game, Skyler Bell has got to be matched up against Syracuse's top cover corner. And take your pick. Is it Demetrius Samuel? Is it Chris Peel? Is it Davian Kerr? Whoever you want it to be, he's got to be matched up against Skyler Bell. But I prefer that Syracuse, as much as possible, that they double cover him throughout the game because he's really, again, the one guy that can truly beat them on the outside. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below right now. What do you think Syracuse football should do with the explosive wide receiver of UConn, Skyler Bell? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now coming up, Syracuse football, yes, they're favored, but they cannot be giving UConn anything in this one. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. Let's face it, if you're a New York Jets fan, you're probably watching NFL Red Zone and keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And hey, you can also bet against the Jets over on FanDuel because you're going to be happy one way or another. Either the Jets are going to win the game or the Jets are going to lose, which stinks, but you'll win your bet over on FanDuel by betting against the New York Jets, which, by the way, solid betting advice. The New York Jets are terrible. And I'm saying that as a New York Jets fan. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Even though the UConn Huskies are a much improved football program, this is still a game that Syracuse football is expected to win. It's the home opener for Syracuse. It's Saturday at noon Eastern. They need to put their best foot forward, and that starts by not giving UConn anything. No gifts in this one. Self-inflicted wounds are the quickest way to open the door of a potential upset. Syracuse football last week was a 2-touchdown underdog against Tennessee. For Tennessee, it was pretty simple for them. Don't give Syracuse really anything, don't commit self-inflicted wounds, and you should be okay. And in that game, if you really think about it, how many mistakes did Tennessee truly make against Syracuse football that were not forced by Syracuse? The answer is not many. There was one big one. It happened early in the game. They were in the red zone, and there was just a botched exchange on a handoff, and Syracuse was fortunate enough to recover that fumble. That was not Syracuse forcing the issue upon Tennessee. That was Tennessee screwing up. And if you're Syracuse in this one, yes, screw-ups are inevitable in football, but they need to be limited as much as possible because, as I just said, it's the quickest way to open the door of a potential upset. So what does this mean for Syracuse more specifically? Number one, no free rushers. The Syracuse offensive line against Tennessee, which was a very good front, actually performed pretty well when they were doing their job. And by that, I mean they were all in communication. They all knew their assignments pre-snap. And so they just had to go out and execute and block the player that was in front of them. They actually did a pretty good job according to Pro Football Focus. But too often against Tennessee, which I guess is to be expected with a brand new offensive line out there was a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of miscommunication leads to free rushers. Now, I understand that Tennessee and UConn, they're different, right? Tennessee is a better team than UConn in pretty much every category, and that includes their defensive lines. But miscommunication is something that can be corrected. However, it doesn't matter who you're playing. Miscommunication is miscommunication. Whether it's you're going up against Tennessee, you're going up against the Purple People Eaters, you're going up against UConn, you're going up against who they're playing next Friday night, Colgate. It doesn't actually matter your opponent when we're talking about miscommunication and allowing free rushers to occur. Make the UConn Huskies front actually beat the offensive line of Syracuse. If they go out and do that, you tip your cap. And we go back to key number one, which is challenging UConn up front and say, you know what? Syracuse just couldn't handle the UConn front. That might, if that happens, so be it. Right? But be on your toes, be alert. Communication is key. No free rushers if you're Syracuse football to get to Steve Angeli. Also, building on that with the defense, no missed tackles. Now, that's an easy statement to make, right? No missed tackles. And let's be honest, missed tackles in football are inevitable. They happen to both teams every game. It's very, very hard to be perfect tackling wise, where every single play throughout the game, the first player that had a chance to wrap a guy up actually wrapped the guy up and made the tackle. It just does not happen where you're perfect. It doesn't matter if it's Georgia going up against Toledo. Georgia is inevitably going to miss some tackles in that game. It happens. It's football. Rather, it can be rephrased a little bit to lessen the impact of those missed tackles. Meaning, if someone is out there and they miss a tackle, which will happen, there has to be another Syracuse defender within the general area who is there to make the tackle. In other words, swarm the ball carrier. If you're Syracuse football, you need 2, 3, 4 guys in on those players so that when a missed tackle happens, there's another guy right there to pick you up. What can't happen, and this is what actually happened last year against UConn very early, 4th and 1 at their own 29, UConn goes up the gut, Cam Edwards, he gets the first down, but it looks like it's only going to be about a 2 to 3 yard play, so they'll get the first down, but that's it. And then he spins away and runs for a 71-yard touchdown. The impact of the missed tackle goes from a 2-yard play to a 71-yard touchdown. That simply can't happen, and we don't need to rehash what happened last week against Tennessee. It's fine. You can live with occasionally a 2-yard play becoming a 4-yard play in the middle of the field or something like that. What can't happen is those small plays or medium plays all of a sudden becoming big plays because nobody can make a tackle at the start, and then there's nobody there to actually back them up. So if the guy misses the tackle, that's it. You're toast if you're the Syracuse defense. So yes, I would love if Syracuse didn't miss a tackle in this one, but what they really what they really need to do is lessen the impact of those missed tackles. So that's what I mean by when I say no gifts, right? And finally, as always, and Syracuse actually last week did a good job of this, limit the penalties against UConn. Not all penalties are created equal. One of the penalties that Syracuse committed last week was in their own territory on a 4th down. They took a delay a game before a punt. You know what? If I had to pick and choose which penalties I can live with and which penalties I can't live with, a delay a game before a punt in your own territory when I think they were around the 20-yard line, especially with Jack Stonehouse as the punter. He's got a big leg. That's fine. I can live with that. Sometimes your defensive back gets burned, and it's more wise for them to commit pass interference than it is to allow the big play. So you live with that penalty and you say, well, don't get beat next time, but thank you for having the presence of mind to tackle the guy before he has a chance to make a play on the ball. So not all penalties are created equal, and to Syracuse's credit, like I just said, last week against Tennessee, only 4 penalties for 30 yards. So for Syracuse against UConn, stay disciplined. Stay disciplined. Don't change anything as far as I'm concerned with that. Penalties were not really an issue against Tennessee last week. Keep at it against UConn. The overall point is make UConn beat Syracuse. If I have to come on here Saturday in the postgame show and say, guys, ladies and gentlemen, Syracuse fans, I am so sorry to tell you this. The UConn Huskies are a better football team than Syracuse, and here's why. You know what? It's just something that we're all going to have to get through. But I will be very, very upset, even more upset, if Syracuse commits 10 penalties for 150 yards, illegal shifts to end a drive, free rushers on Steve Angeli, things that don't need to happen against UConn in this one. Make UConn beat Syracuse. not Syracuse beat itself. What are your keys for the Orange to knock off UConn? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. As far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, the next podcast, timing is to be determined, will be a crossover podcast with Locked On UConn. On Friday, we got Poll Friday, predict the outcome of the game. Syracuse blowout win, Syracuse close win, UConn close win, UConn blowout win. We'll talk about that on Friday. And then on Saturday, Syracuse takes on UConn at noon Eastern. There will be a full post-game reaction podcast here on Locked On Syracuse. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.